All right, today we're going to dive into a really powerful book, Marshall B. Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life. And really, this isn't so much about communication techniques as it is about a total shift in how we connect with ourselves and, with everyone else. So here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off by talking about the crisis of connection we're all facing. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts, the four-part model of NVC. After that, we'll explore the huge role empathy plays, how NVC is more of a lifestyle than a trick, see where it's used in the real world, and then wrap up with its legacy.
Okay, let's set the stage a bit. Why is a book like this so incredibly important right now? Well, as Rosenberg sees it, it really all boils down to a modern-day crisis of connection. Just think about it for a second. In your own life, all the texts, the emails, the DMs, the posts, we are talking to each other constantly. But this question right here really gets to the heart of the issue. Are any of us actually, truly connecting?
Because this is what happens, right? Our conversations turn into these minefields of judgment and snap reactions. We end up talking at each other instead of with each other. And the result? This deep, nagging feeling of being isolated, even when we're surrounded by people.
And this is exactly where nonviolent communication, or NVC, steps in. It's not just some new set of rules for talking. It's a completely different way of approaching how we interact with people, one that's built from the ground up on empathy and mutual respect.
And this right here is the core belief that drives the whole thing. It totally reframes how we look at conflict. Instead of seeing people as good or bad, NVC suggests that when people do hurtful things, it's just a tragic, clumsy attempt to meet some deep human need. That one idea, it changes everything.
So the big question is, how do we actually do this? How do we put this big idea into practice? Well, Rosenberg gives us a really clear, actionable framework to do just that. And it all comes down to these 4 simple steps: observation, feelings, needs, and requests. Now, it looks easy enough, but the real power is in how these 4 things work together to shut down conflict before it starts and, actually build a real connection. So the first step, observation, is all about just stating what you see or hear. Think of it like a camera recording a scene. You're just reporting the raw facts, completely stripped of any of your own judgments or opinions.
And this is a perfect example of the difference. If you say, "You're inconsiderate," that's a judgment. It's an attack, and it immediately makes the other person put their walls up. But if you say, "When I saw you leave the dishes in the sink," well, that's just a fact. Nobody can argue with it. It creates a shared starting point for a conversation, not a fight.
Okay, so once you've stated that neutral observation, step 2 is to share how you feel. And I mean your actual emotion, not what you think about it. Saying something like, "I feel irritated," or "I'm feeling anxious," lets the other person connect with your human experience.
Then comes step 3, needs, and this one is so important. This is where you connect your feeling to a reason. NVC is built on the idea that our feelings are basically signals that point to our universal human needs. So, for example, I feel irritated because I have a need for order and to feel like we're contributing equally in our home. See the difference? And finally, you make a request. And this is a huge one. A request is not a demand. It's a very specific positive action the other person could take. Like, would you be willing to wash your dishes right after you use them? The absolute key here is that they have to be genuinely free to say no. That's what creates cooperation instead of just forced compliance.
So that 4-part model is incredibly powerful for expressing ourselves, but it's really only half the story. The other half of the equation is all about how we listen, and that is all about empathy.
In NVC, empathy means being completely present with someone. It's not about just waiting for your turn to speak or trying to come up with a solution. It's about listening with your entire being to really try and understand their feelings and their needs, without jumping in to fix things or one-up them with your own story. You're just there with them. And just as crucial is self-empathy. When you're the one who's triggered or upset, instead of blaming yourself or someone else, you turn this exact same process inward. You ask yourself, okay, what am I observing? What am I feeling right now? And what unmet need is this feeling pointing to? It is an absolute game changer for managing your own emotions.
The more you practice this stuff, the more you start to realize that these 4 steps aren't just some clever communication hack. They really start to shift your entire perspective on things. It really becomes a whole mindset. It's about making a commitment to being authentic, to being vulnerable enough to share what's really happening inside you, and to having a deep, genuine compassion and curiosity for what's driving other people too.
And believe me, this isn't just some abstract theory. The applications for this NVC mindset are incredibly wide-ranging, and they touch pretty much every part of our lives.
I mean, NVC has been used everywhere, in couples counseling, in parenting, in corporate boardrooms, and even to mediate conflicts in war-torn countries. It just goes to show you that the language of fundamental human needs is truly universal. So let's take a minute to talk about some of the challenges and the lasting impact of Marshall Rosenberg's work.
Of course, it's not always easy. A lot of people say that it feels really robotic or unnatural at first, and that makes sense because our old habits are so deeply ingrained. Some people worry that it's just a slick way to manipulate people, but true NVC is always about connection, never about just getting what you want. And yeah, it can definitely slow down a conversation, but it usually prevents the much longer, way more painful fights that come from misunderstandings.
But despite those hurdles, Rosenberg's work has ignited a global movement. His legacy is alive and well through the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and there are literally thousands of trainers sharing this amazing practice all over the world.
At the end of the day, this book is so much more than a communication manual. It's really a guide to living with more honesty and courage. And this quote from Rosenberg himself just captures the whole spirit of it perfectly. It's all about creating that flow, that mutual giving that comes straight from the heart.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought. In a world that so often feels angry and divided, the ideas in nonviolent communication offer a really practical path forward. The real question isn't whether you can master some new technique overnight. It's about how each and every one of us can start using these tools to create a little more true, heartfelt connection in our own lives, starting right now.